I'm the best there is at what I do. And what I do is review movies. Well, honestly, I don't really ever think I'm the best at reviewing and critiquing movies. I mean, when I think of people who are really great and awesome at reviewing and critiquing movies, I think of people like, Doug Walker or Jeremy Johns or the Blockbuster Buster, people who know what they're doing and, these jokes are, clever and usually don't fall apart when the second they say them, like, my jokes, they kind of like break. So the thing I just said in the opening was kind of a lie. It was said it just to tie it in with the movie and with feeling today. Wolverine says it in the movie. I have nowhere to go with that. Let's just get started reviewing X-Men, I guess. So yeah, today I will be reviewing X-Men from the first X-Men movie from 2000, as well as the second X-Men movie, X-2, X-Men United from 2003, because I honestly don't have too much to say, particularly about the first movie, or really the second movie for all that matter, that would fill up an entire 15 or 20-minute video. So that's why I'm clumping together both those movies together, or both these movies together in this one video, so I can actually have a little, longer, lengthier of a video, because, videos aren't long enough, if you haven't noticed. I will be reviewing X-Men 3, but I have so much to say, mostly negative things to say about that movie. So that will be its own separate video that will be coming out later, but I'm reviewing these movies extremely early in advance of the release of the movie in May, because with the whole schedule that I have with my videos this year, with that month, that year, and a bunch of other videos I want to do, I kind of have to review these movies in advance of the movie's release date. So that's why I'm reviewing some of these movies before they are even released, months before they're even released. So that explains why this review may be coming a little bit early. I just want to get these videos out of the way so I can get to some other videos I want to do down the line. So that said, let's get started with my review of the first X-Men movie way back from 2000, simply titled X-Men. And before I get into this video, and before I talk about the X-Men characters and the X-Men movies, I want to stress that I am not a huge X-Men fan. I never really was, and what I know of the X-Men really comes from these movies, a couple of the TV shows and cartoons, and a little bit of comics. I mean, like a little bit of the comic books. So I won't be, throughout these reviews pointing out a lot of continuity errors with the comic books or stuff that they messed up in the movies from adapting to the comic books. Except for when I review X-Men 3. That movie is probably just, my movie review of that is just going to be completely filled of, they messed up this from the comic books and stuff like that, because there was a lot of stuff in that movie that really pissed me off that was from the comic books that they messed up. So when I get to that, that's just going to be completely bitching up and get some stuff in the comic book right. But for right now, I'm not going to bitch about too many things, especially for this one, because this was the first movie, and, they didn't really have the ability to do too many things from the comic books right and justice. So it doesn't really, bother me all that much. Especially because, again, I'm not a big X-Men fan. Again, from what I know, my prior knowledge of X-Men comes from the movies, some cartoons, and a little bit of comic books. So I want to stress that before I get into this review. But the first X-Men movie I enjoy a lot as its simple, solid action movie. I don't absolutely love it, and I don't hail it as, one of the all-time greatest comic book movies of all time. It's probably not even on, like, my list of, like, maybe top 10 or 15 or even 20 favorite comic book movies of all time. Again, that's probably because I'm not a big X-Men fan, so I don't really get a big fanboy enjoyment out of it, but I do enjoy it still as its own solid action movie. And I think I respect it more as a comic book movie than I actually do enjoy it more as a comic book movie, because this movie's pretty much responsible for the big boom in comic book movies that we have today. It's because of this movie's success that we have comic book movies, or as many comic book movies as we do today, with all the Marvel movies, the DC movies coming out. So really, if you think about it, if this movie didn't happen, we wouldn't have, great comic book movies like Spider-Man movies, Batman movies, or a bunch of other ones I'm really forgetting right now. But it's because of this movie's success that we have as many comic movies as we do today, which, in that regards, I do respect the movie a lot, but I don't enjoy it too much as, a great game-changing comic book movie, even though it is a game-changing comic book movie. I just see it as a simple, solid action movie, like I meant. That's why I will end up giving it a solid rating. But I don't. It's really just its own solid, superhero comic book action movie. With a simple plot like, bad guys have to know good. Superheroes have to stop them in the end. And Yeah, I know that when you get down to it, that pretty much is every single comic book superhero movie. Hell, that's every single action movie when you get down to it. But this movie really is just that. Like Magneto wants to turn everybody in the world into mutants, so that everyone is equal and not different. But the X-Men have to stop them, and they pretty much end up doing that. It's very, very cookie cutter, very, very by the numbers X-Men movie, and very by the numbers comic book movie. So that's why I don't enjoy it too much as like one of the greatest comic movies of all time. And I know a lot of people enjoy it, and I know I don't want to step on their feet or anything and say, oh, it's not that great, but it's not like amazing comic movie of all time. For its time, it was really good, especially for its time because this came out at a time when comic book movies were kind of considered dead. I mean, this was I remember post Batman and Robins and post Steel. Yeah, I remember Steel with Shaquille O'Neal. Fuck that movie. Who cares about it? But this was like post those movies, and after those movies came out, their movie industry was just kind of dead. I think the only comic book movie that came out after those movies before X Men was Blade, which is really good, admittedly really good, but like a big comic book movie, none really came out after Batman and Robin and Steel. So this was like the first big, the first really big, comic book movie after those movies. The first, what's it? The first, again, big, comic book movie or something like that. I don't know. I have horrible time wording certain things. Um, it was the first. I'm totally forgetting, but it was the first big comic movie in a very long time. That's basically what I'm trying to say. It was due to the success that we have big comic movies. It came as a big surprise to everyone that it was as big and successful as it was. But for its time, I think it was good, but, I don't think it's really aged all that well. I think it's, admittedly a fun action movie, but I don't think it's like Dark Knight level, amazingness, even though at its time it kind of was the Dark Knight of its time, because it revolutionized comic movies, how they should be made, and it kind of set the bar for how certain comic movies should be made. So that's why, in regards of it from as an entertaining movie or a respectful movie, I respect it more as a comic movie because, again, if it wasn't for this movie, we wouldn't have as many comic movies as we do now. But I still do enjoy it as its own action movie, and maybe that's because I only enjoy it a little bit because I'm not a big X-Men fan. Maybe that's the case, but I don't know. I just think it's a fun action movie. But let's talk more about the movie, and we'll go a little bit more in depth. I think one thing that you cannot at all say is a bad thing about any of these X-Men movies, something that you cannot at all critique negatively, is the casting. I think the casting for these X-Men movies have all been solid casting and like material casting. Like when you hear that person was cast as this character, you go, that's perfect. That's character perfectly realized. And first person I want to talk about that perfectly sums that up is, of course, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, which I've already talked about in numerous other videos, so I'll just keep it at this. Hugh Jackman is the only person, I think, right now that is living and breathing who can play Wolverine perfectly. He perfectly captured the character both in spirit and in, physical form, which came as a big surprise to a lot of people when the movie first came out because it's very much like Michael Keaton with Batman. Like, not a whole lot of people expected him to play the character amazingly, but he actually turned in an amazing performance that blew everyone away. And admittedly so, it came as a surprise because the dude was pretty much known before these movies. He was an Australian Broadway singer. When you hear that an Australian Broadway singer is playing Wolverine, you're definitely going to have a few, reservations on that. But he actually turned in a great performance, and it's one of those rare instances where I actually can see the actor just became the character. Um, he's turned in a great performance, and there is nobody else that I can think of right now that can actually play the character perfectly than Hugh Jackman. Like, if they ever sadly reboot the X-Men franchise sometime down the line, which hopefully they don't, I don't care if it's a reboot or not, you have to get Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine. That's just, it only makes sense. You need to have him back as Wolverine. It only makes sense. The same thing with Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. If they sadly, hopefully not, but if they sadly do reboot the whole Marvel franchise, you need to get Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. You need to get Hugh Jackman as Wolverine because these are the only people that can play these two characters. Nobody else can play them, only these two people. But I've talked enough about Hugh Jackman, not only in this video, but in other videos, so there's two other people I want to talk about in regards of acting and, casting, like, oh, that's perfect casting, which is Patrick Stewart as Professor X or Professor Xavier. and Sir Ian McKellen himself as Magneto. These, again, like I said, are two perfect casting decisions that you just make you think those are the characters perfectly realized. These two dudes were born to play, the roles of, Magneto and Professor X, and they do a great job. Professor X is, awesome, and Patrick Stewart playing him is awesome. I mean, it's Captain Picard as, Professor X. I mean, they're like the same character except one can walk. And the other one is Gandalf the Grey as a supervillain. It's awesome. How would you not love that? So those two casting decisions that I absolutely love. Well, three casting decisions I absolutely love in these movies. These movies have just had great casting decisions overall, like with Halle Berry as Storm or James Marsden as Cyclops. But that's one thing I've always despised about each and every single one of these X-Men movies is Cyclops kind of sucks in every single one of these movies. Well, scratch that. Not kind of. He does suck in every single one of these movies. It's not because of James Marsden's acting in the movie, because I do think that James Marsden is a genuinely good actor. It's just that he has nothing to work with in any of these movies, which is an absolute shame, and it's absolutely criminal because Cyclops is the leader in the leader in the X-Men comic books, TV shows. He's just the leader of the movies. So which just seems, again, like I said, criminal. I mean, you're having the leader have the least amount of screen time or development in any of these movies. That's like the equivalent of, well, Captain America having the least amount of development or screen time in, like, the Avengers movies. He's the leader. He should have the most amount of screen time, and honestly, he should be the main character. I mean, he's the leader. It only makes sense to have him be, the main character. He's the leader of the team. He's the one that brings everyone together. He should have the most screen time and development. But no, it's all given to Wolverine, which is, again, another big thing I hate about these X-Men movies is Wolverine has all the screen time, all the development, and all the, the spotlight, all the limelight in the movies, which is because he's the most marketable, so they gotta give the most marketable character the most screen time. I mean, it's alright to develop him. I mean, you have to develop each and every single one of the characters to get us, to really root for him, and really, make it out in the end. But he is overdeveloped to the point it's just you know too much about him. Like, this character was shrouded in mystery in the comic books. You didn't know too much about him at all in the comic books. Like, you knew little to none about him in the comic books. And yet, in the movies, he's just given every single thing. Like, what's his name? What happened to him? Why he lost his memory? What's his fucking favorite cereal? What's his favorite color? What's his favorite day of the week? What's his favorite number? Like, all that shit. You literally know all that shit, and it's too much to know. But when actual characters who need development, like Cyclops, they don't get any single development, piece of development at all. That just really pissed me off. And they're not given anything to do. Cyclops is barely given anything to do in any of these movies. I mean, he's given some stuff to do in the first movie, but in the second movie, he's knocked out and brainwashed. And then in the third movie, to add insult to injury, he dies in the first 10 to 20 minutes in the movie. Yeah, Cyclops kind of sucks in these movies. And then in Origins, let's just face it, he pretty much wasn't even in Origins, and he literally wasn't even in First Class. His fucking little brother was. So yeah, Cyclops kind of sucks in these movies, and that's a shame because I think James Marsden is not only a good casting decision for the Cyclops, but I think he's, a genuinely good actor, and if he was given the right material for playing Cyclops, he could turn in, a really great performance. But no, we gotta give all the limelight to Wolverine, because he doesn't have enough development already. I think Wolverine as a character works better when he's shrouded in mystery, when he's just sort of a background player. He's not the main character, but in these movies he is. I think he works better when he's shrouded in mystery. Like, a lot of people say that about Batman, which I kind of disagree with, but with Wolverine I completely, wholeheartedly agree with. I think he works better as a character which you don't know nothing about. I mean, it's alright to eventually reveal what's going to happen, but don't reveal every single thing that's going to happen to him. Every single thing that's happened to him and will happen to him. It's just annoying. And it's just, you don't need to know everything about this character. And because he's the most marketable, you have to throw him in everything, which I really hated. Not only the Cyclops get barely any development, but none of the other X-Men get any other development, really. Like, Storm really isn't all that developed. Jean Grey, I guess, is developed. But really no one else besides that. Just, Jean Grey and Wolverine. That's because they kind of have a love triangle going with, Cyclops, too. But that's really about it. It's just those three characters and nobody else. Any of the X-Men that are in this movie or future X-Men movies aren't really developed all that much. Which surprises me why X-Men First Class was so successful, because that was like the first complete, he was kind of in it, but he wasn't like a main character in it. So that comes as a big surprise that X-Men First Class was as successful as it was without having Wolverine in it. But I digress. But that's just one of my big complaints about these movies that I never liked. So Wolverine was too overdeveloped, and I always never liked that. I always thought he was a character that worked better rather in mystery. But the first X-Men movie as a whole, I don't have too much to say about it. I think it's just, it's a simple, minor, fun action movie. It's a solid action movie for the most part. And I'm really sorry that this review is short, but after watching the movie, that's all I really had to say about it. There wasn't really anything I had too much to complain about, other than it's kind of like a cookie cutter, by the numbers, you know, uh, superhero movie, and that's not a shame at all. I mean, the Avengers, when you get down to it, is just a simple by superhero movie. Bad guy wants to take over the world, hero stop him, the end. But it still does some stuff a little bit differently. It still has some other little interesting pieces in it. But this one overall is just kind of your simple action movie. No harm at all. It's still a fun movie, and I definitely do recommend it to a lot of big X-Men fans and just people who want to watch a simple, basic, fun action movie. So that's why I'm going to give it a simple, fun, basic, solid rating of 8 out of 10. I thought it was, good for the most part. And again, maybe that's just coming from me because I'm just not that big of an X-Men fan, but I enjoyed it for the most part, and I gave it a good rating. So now we have the second X-Men movie, which surprisingly is one of those rare instances where the sequel actually turned out to be better, at least in my opinion, than the first movie. Actually, when you really think about it, it's not that big of a rare instance anymore. I mean, Dark Knight, Star Trek 2, I mean, Wrath of Khan, Into Darkness. I mean, Into Darkness was kind of Wrath of Khan, pretty much was Wrath of Khan, but I digress. Terminator 2, Judgment Day, it's not really that rare. There's a lot of good, better sequels that are better than the first movies out there, but again, I digress. But this is just one of those movies that actually turned out to be way better than the first movie. And almost every single last, in every single last, level, or every single last, what's it called, every single last part, or whatever. It's just better than the first movie. That's basically what I'm trying to say. I cannot speak. I think that's probably because I'm half asleep at 5 in the morning. Can't sleep, whatever. Let's continue on reviewing X-Men 2, X-Men United. That was actually, before I go further into the movie, that was always something I never liked about this movie, was the stupid title, X2, X-Men United. I never liked the X-Men United part. I always thought that was a stupid, just, needless and useless subtitle. They're the X-Men, they're a team, you kind of know they're united, so you don't need to have that in there. So, I always thought that was a shitty subtitle. I mean, but to have a subtitle in your movie have it make sense. I mean, yeah, it does make sense, but it's not needed. It's not useful at all, so just take it out of the movie. I mean, just call it X-Men set up for very disappointing payoff. That's kind of what this movie is. It set up a whole lot of shit that would be done in later X-Men movies, but was done very disappointingly in X-Men 3. That's pretty much what you can call it. Just X-Men, big setup for disappointing payoff by Brett Ratner in the third X-Men movie. Just call it that. I mean, or just leave it simply X2 or just X-Men 2. I don't get why sequel titles have to be so fucking intricate and complicated. Just keep it, just add 2 or 3 or 4 to it and simple. Just keep it simple like that, but it's not too simple. Now, like I mentioned when my review of the first X-Men movie, one of my complaints about was that it was just kind of its own cookie cutter, basic, superhero, plots, bad guy, let's take over the world, hero stop him, the end. This movie is kind of like that, but there's still a lot more going on. There's still, it's kind of like that. It is that pretty much. I mean, guy wants to, take over the world or, cause harm to the world in some way, shape, or form. But there's still a little bit more to it. There's still a little bit more than just that. Now, something that I really do enjoy about this movie is that with the sequel, this movie does have 2 villains. We have Magneto from the villain from the first movie, and we also have a new villain, which is General Stryker, who kind of has some ties to Wolverine's past, which I'll get into in a minute. And his whole deal is that he wants to, he hates mutants. He thinks they're absolutely disgusting and horrible. So he tries to, just cause mass genocide by killing all the mutants using Professor X's little machine thing called Cerebro, which can contact all the little mutants. But he's trying to use it to kill all the mutants in this movie. I enjoyed this movie a lot, and again, this is why it's a little bit different from the first movie and from most comic movies, is that whenever there's 2 or more villains in a comic book movie, they always team up because, oh hey, you hate superheroes or whatever. Well, I hate them too, so let's team up and fight them and kill them. Which I always think is annoying. I mean, yeah, I mean, if they have common goals, of course you're gonna team up. But in this movie, I like it because it's a little bit different. Because the two villains that are in the movie don't at all team up. In fact, they actually despise each other. Again, General Striker hates mutants. Magneto is a mutant, so of course we're not gonna team up just because they both hate the X-Men. So I like that. It actually ends up Magneto working with the X-Men because Magneto's a mutant, and they're all working together for mutant kind, so of course we're going to go against this dickhead who wants to get rid of mutants, which is something that I love about these X-Men movies. The X-Men movies, I think, perfectly capture Magneto as a villain. Is that he's a villain, yeah, and he'll do several things, but if he needs to team up with the X-Men to, reach a common goal, he's going to do it. He's not a dumbass. Like, in this movie, he teamed up with the X-Men because if he doesn't do that, then all mutant kind is going to be pretty much dead and lost. So he's not an idiot. He's not going to say, oh no, I hate you guys. He's going to be like, well, I don't agree with you guys, but I'm going to have to do it to help out myself. So I like that. I like that they show that Magneto's a smart villain. And if he needs to work with the, X-Men to reach common goal, then he's going to do that. He's not just going to wimp out because he has different opinions or ideologies or whatever. And that's what they do in this movie. General Stryker and Magneto have different ideologies and different, viewpoints. So of course we're not going to have them team up, which I thought was really clever and actually kind of ahead of the time for 2003. Because again, this was a time when comic book movies had, more than one villain, and all those two villains would team up and they would, just fight the bad guy, the good guy together. But in this movie, it's very different. Like they're bad guys, but they don't work together. So I enjoyed that a lot. It made sense why they work together. So that's just something I personally always enjoyed about this movie. I always noticed, and I was just like, that's a really cool part in the movie. And again, it's really ahead of the time because this movie came out in 2003. A lot of comic movies at the time weren't that ahead of the time. So I enjoyed that part a lot about the movie. And again, the cast is great in this movie. Hugh Jackman returns as Wolverine. Halle Berry as Storm, James Marsden as Cyclops, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Sir Patrick Stewart as Professor X, and we also have some new people, Nightcrawler, some new character Nightcrawler, which I gotta say right here, Nightcrawler, I'm not a big X-Men fan, but Nightcrawler was always and still is my favorite X-Men character to date, or member of the X-Men team. My favorite X-Men character in the entire comics is probably Deadpool. Why? He's Deadpool. Just look it up. Deadpool is awesome. But my favorite X-Men member of the X-Men is without a doubt Nightcrawler. He was just always a cool character to me, and he was just always badass. I mean, he could teleport wherever he wanted. He's really sneaky and stealthy. And he's blue, which is my favorite color. We've got blue right there. So he was just a really badass, cool character. And he actually turns out to be Mystique's son in the comic books. They kind of hint at that in the movie, but they really don't go into it too much. They kind of hint at it and maybe set it up for a future movie, but they never really resolve it in a future movie. So fuck it. I mean, but the Nightcrawler in this movie was really, really awesome. I'm forgetting the guy's name who plays him, but he did an amazing job. The makeup work that they actually ended up doing for him looks really badass and really, really cool. I'm glad that they went with actual prosthetics as opposed to CGI. Again, this was the early 2000s, so it makes sense why they would use early prosthetics. So I enjoyed that. I love Nightcrawler in this movie, and I thought he was really badass in the movie. And he actually is probably 100% faithful to the comic books. Well, again, not a big X-Men fan, so I don't know, but from what I have seen from Nightcrawler in the comic books, they pretty much got him down really right in this. Maybe not the costume, but they got him down pretty right. I mean, he looked like Nightcrawler, he acted like Nightcrawler, so I was really happy about that. And overall, I just love this movie a lot more than I do the first X-Men movie. Not that I hate the first X-Men movie, I just like this one a little bit better. The same way I like Terminator 2 a little bit more than Terminator 1 because Terminator 2 is just a little bit better. This I absolutely love, and it's kind of a toss-up between X-Men First Class and X-Men 2, X-Men United as to which one's my favorite at this point. I don't know. I think I have to rewatch First Class a little bit. It's probably X-Men 2, but I enjoy X-Men First Class also. Probably on the same wavelength, and probably for the same reasons alone. And there's something about this movie that I do enjoy, but also kind of dislike. Again, Wolverine's origin story is pretty much flat out, shown in this movie. Like Stryker gave Wolverine his claws, and we kind of learn why he doesn't remember anything, why he has amnesia. I enjoy this because, again, Wolverine is being developed as a character. and he was kind of set up for development in the first movie, and as he was developed, fully here. But I hate this because, again, the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie just ruined this, which I explained in my X-Men Origins Wolverine review, which you can check out. Something I absolutely hated about the movie was you didn't need it. It wasn't needed because this movie was pretty much the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie. It gave out Wolverine's origins completely. So why do we need a whole origin movie? Why? Oh, because Wolverine is a big selling character, so we have to make a whole movie about him. So that's the reason why. But I personally enjoyed this movie just a little bit more than X-Men first X-Men movie. Sorry, for a lot of reasons. Most because it just seems like more than just your average, cookie cutter superhero movie. But I still do enjoy the X-Men movie a lot, and that's why I'm going to give this movie a 9. Actually, no, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I still do have some problems with it. I think, I like that they set up the Phoenix, at the end of the movie, which would have been done in the third movie, but I think that's where I get a lot of my problems with this movie. They set up so many badass, so many awesome, cool stuff for future X-Men movies, and then the third one just ruined it. And I'm definitely gonna blame the third movie. Don't get me wrong, but this movie, I feel kind of disappointed. There are some plot holes in it, but they're not too. They're kind of nitpicky plot holes, but overall, I enjoy this movie, and that's why I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. I give the first X-Men movie an 8 out of 10. So that was this for my review of X-Men and X-2, X-Men United. So I guess that only leaves X-Men 3, The Last Stand. I'm not looking forward to seeing that movie. Huh? What was that? Wait, I don't have to review X-Men The Last Stand? Oh, good, finally some good news. So what movie do I have to review next? Captain America. Well, I know Winter Soldier is coming out, but I already reviewed Captain America last year, remember, for 4th of July? No. No, you don't mean that Captain America movie. That's not fair. That doesn't count. That's not part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, asshole. That doesn't count. I'm not reviewing that piece of shit. I'm under contract? What contract? I didn't sign no contract. I don't even get paid for these reviews. I just do it for fun. I mean, I really have to review the shitty Captain America movie from the 1990s starring J.D. Salinger's son. It doesn't even count. It's not even the same thing. Do for you rat bastards. Well, I don't know whether I should be happy because I don't have to review X-Men First Class, but I had to review the piece of shit 90s Captain America movie. So, next time I see you guys, I'll review the 1990s Captain America movie. You get paid.